Everyone is doing well this morning. The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order. At this time, I'll ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. I recognize the senator from the 28th, reading of the journal.
Good morning, Mr. President. Looking forward to another fine day in the Georgia State Senate. Today being Dr. Seuss Day, International Rescue a Cat Day, National Banana Cream Pie Day, National Old Stuff Day, that's for our senator from the 24th, and it's, of course, Read Across America Day. I want to thank all our pages that are here with us today. We're going to have a long day. Hope you can stay with us and serve the great people of the great state of Georgia. Great lineup of pages today. We've got Adam Rodriguez, Maya Edmondson, Maya Story, Joshua Erdy, Vihan Krishna, Quincy Brachi, Maya Efrat, Emily Porter, and Sophia Parker. So thank y'all pages for your great service today. Y'all give our pages a round of applause. Mr. President, the journal has been read, but I actually found a little error. And there's an error in the journal of the 24th legislative day.
Hey, Senator, I think let's get this journal approved, and then we'll look for the motion on the error from the other day.
Well, today's journal's been read and found to be correct.
All right. Well, is there objection to dispensing of the reading of the journal? Chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Now, is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. Now the chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for the correction.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was an error found in the journal of the 24th legislative day, and I ask that the senator from the 21st district be recognized to explain.
All right. Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. Rules Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the report from the Committee on Economic Development and Tourism on February 27th erroneously read SB 55, due pass by committee substitute LC 540211S. The report should have read SB 55, due pass by committee substitute LC 500543S. I therefore ask for unanimous consent that the journal for Legislative Day 24 be corrected to reflect the appropriate LC number. Thank you.
Okay. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 55 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 80 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to general provisions relative to counties, municipal corporations, and other governmental entities so as to prohibit the regulation of businesses of persons under 18 years of age. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 21st has asked unanimous consent that the Senate Journal from the 24th legislative day be corrected so that the report from the Committee on Economic Development and Tourism reads SB 55, due pass by substitute. Is there objection? Hearing none, the journal is corrected as requested. Substitute is in question is on today's rules calendar. You're now receiving the correct copy for this in your books. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk. First reading and references to Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 279 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and Anna Vitarte of the 31st, a bill to be entitled an act relating to state flag, seal, and other symbols so as to provide.
State and
Senate Bill
properties.
Senate Bill 280 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to tourist courts so as to prohibit tourist courts from
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 281 by Senator Harbison of the 15th, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions regarding child custody proceedings so as to provide judicial discretion in determining the right of a surviving parent to custody of a child when such surviving
Children
parent.
and family.
Senate Bill 282 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled act.
Insurance and labor.
Senate Bill 283 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating
Judiciary.
to. Senate Bill 284 by Senator Estevez of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating
Education
to.
and youth.
Senate Resolution 235 by Senator Moore of the 53rd and others, a resolution urging the federal government of the United States to conduct a comprehensive.
Rules.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
First reading references the House bills.
House Bill 43 by Representative Lim of the 98th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to protection of American Indian human remains and
Natural
burial.
resources.
House Bill 51 by Representative Perkel of the 169th and others, a bill to be entitled an act.
Education and youth.
House Bill 63 by Representative Williams of the 148th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to furnishing
Insurance
claims.
and labor.
House Bill 130 by Representative Gamble of the 15th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the Georgia Student Finance Authority so as to
Higher
provide.
education.
House Bill 185 by Representative Gaines of the 120th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to Hope scholarships and grants so as to provide
Higher
for Hope.
education.
House Bill 298 by Representative Daniel of the 117th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions regarding.
Judiciary.
House Bill 308 by Representative Newton of the 127th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to income taxes so as to.
Finance.
House Bill 311 by Representative Smith of the 70th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to.
Finance.
House Bill 318 by Representative Hilton of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to elementary and secondary
Education and youth.
education. House Bill 336 by Representative Cox of the 28th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to amendment and revision of codes generally so as to
Regulated
prohibit.
industries.
House Bill 338 by Representative Irwin of the 32nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act of Quality Basic Education Act so as to
Education
provide.
and youth.
House Bill 402 by Representative Hilton of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the health of elementary and secondary school students.
Education and youth.
House Bill 406 by Representative Jaspers of the 11th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to
Regulated industries.
jurisdiction. House Bill 436 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others, a bill to be
Natural
entitled an act.
resources.
House Bill 460 by Representative Bellinger of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to juvenile
Children and
code.
family.
House Bill 500 by Representative Silcox of the 53rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to arson and explosives so as to provide for the offense of arson.
Judiciary.
House Bill 505 by Representative Chokas of the 151st and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to riot so as to provide for a felony penalty to amend.
Judiciary.
House Bill 508 by Representative Ballinger of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to restraining orders.
Judiciary.
House Bill 509 by Representative Ballinger of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to burglary so as to include an
Children
act.
and family.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will read reports of standing committees.
The Senate Committee on Finance has had under consideration the following legislation as instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 95 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hofstetler of the 52nd District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Second readings.
Senate Bill 64 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, birth certificate, issuance of a copy of the original birth certificate to certain adult persons who were adopted provide. Senate Bill 103 by Senator Goodman of the 8th and others, unclaimed property, handling of certain wills provide. Senate Bill 146 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, Georgia Public Service Commission, regulation and taxation of a provision of certain electricity used as a motor fuel in electric vehicles provide. Senate Bill 147 by Senator Still of the 48th and others, boundless opportunities for Georgia students act enact. Senate Bill 171 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, developmental authorities, the length of a director's holdover period following expiration of term of office limit. Senate Bill 172 by Senator Cowser of the 46th and others, state government, regulation and taxation of sports betting in this state, authorize and provide. Senate Bill 193 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, broadband services, Department of Community Affairs to determine locations that are eligible for state or federal funding programs administered by the state provide. Senate Bill 195 by Senator Walker III of the 20th and others, Freedom to Work Act enact. Senate Bill 200 by Senator Cowser of the 46th and others, Civil Practice Act, high-ranking government or corporate officer of whom a disposition is sought to seek a protective order provide. Senate Bill 204 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, education accountability, recognition of certain accrediting agencies as evaluators of the quality of education offered in public schools in this state provide. Senate Bill 208 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, Georgia Development Impact Fee enact. Act provide for fees for education. Senate Bill 211 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others, Georgia Council on Literacy established. Senate Bill 221 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, primaries and elections. The language that must be used on absentee ballot applications distributed by persons or entities revised. Senate Bill 230 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, programs and protection for children, foster parents, Bill of Rights, revised provisions. Senate Bill 233 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act, establishment of Promise Scholarship accounts. Senate Bill 235 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others, HBCU Innovation and Economic Prosperity Planning Districts Act enact. Senate Bill 236 by Senator Sessler of the 37th and others, Board of Commissioners of Cobb County, the description of commissioner districts changed. Senate Bill 240 by Senator Walker III of the 20th and others, retirement and pensions, the minimum and maximum allowable benefit multiplier for current and future retirees revised. Senate Bill 246 by Senator Hodges III and others, Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce student loan repayment for certain nursing facility faculty provide. Senate Bill 254 by Senator Brasso, the 28th, selling and other trade practices, requirements for earned wage access services provide. Senate Bill 259 by Sarah Hatchett of the 50th and others, Superior Court of Banks County, moved from the Piedmont Judicial Circuit to the Mountain Judicial Circuit. Senate Bill 260 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, Georgia Electric Vehicle Future Act enacts. Senate Bill 266 by Senator Harbin of the 16th and others, retirement and pensions, fiduciary duty to invest retirement assets solely in the financial interests of participants and their beneficiaries provide. Senate Bill 272 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others, courts supplement the duties of administrative judges, criminal case data exchange board reestablished. Senate Bill 274 by Senator Harbin of the 16th and others, Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired create. Senate Resolution 46 by Senator Merritt of the 9th and others, Governor to study whether the state can either directly or indirectly produce low-cost insulin products in the state urge. Senate Resolution 189 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th, General Assembly, developmental impact fees for educational purposes provide. Senate Resolution 214 by Senator Gann of the 47th and others, Joint Study Committee on Local Options, Sales Tax, and Service Delivery Strategy create. Senate Resolution 221 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, Joint Study Committee on Runoff Elections create. House Bill 55 by Representative Williamson of the 112th and others, Banking and Finance provide for definitions provisions. House Bill 129 by Representative Hong of the 103rd and others, Public Assistance, expand temporary assistance for needy families, eligibility criteria to pregnant women. House Bill 165 by Representative New of the 64th and others, State Government, public disclosure not required relative to inspection of public records, includes certain documents from Department of Natural Resources. House Bill 207 by Representative Rhodes of the 124th and others, Water, Ports, and Watercraft, carrying of night visual distress signals upon coastal waters during certain hours provide. Mr. President, that completes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, y'all. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 43rd and the 5th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senators from the 43rd and the 5th are excused. Any other motions to excuse? Secretary will call the roll. Senators, signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for the morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask that the doorkeepers secure the chamber at this time. I recognize my senator from the 25th District, for the purpose of the pledge and introducing our chaplain of the day. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. If y'all will join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and the Georgia flag. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank y'all for being here today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce another undertaker, probably the funniest undertaker you'll ever hear from. He originally from Reynolds, Georgia, a little town. Some of you have heard about that, a little place close to Macon, Georgia. But Bruce and I have been friends for many, many years. Matter of fact, my mother is a funeral director, and she actually worked with him back many years ago. But I'm not going to take more time. It's Bruce Goddard. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Williams, and he is right. And thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jones, for having me here. Thank all of you for having me here. Senator Williams is right. You got an undertaker to speak to you for a few minutes this morning. I'm going to be very quick. That means you need to sit on the edge of your seats and look alive, okay? Because I guarantee you I can tell the difference, all right? I'm going to give you 4 quick observations that I made viewing life from my hearse. I view life from a hearse. The first observation I made is the world ain't going to stop when you die. Do y'all realize that? Some of us think we're going to live forever. It's going to keep right on going. The second observation I made, that we need to lighten up. It is okay to laugh. You're not that important. It's okay to have a sense of humor. It's even okay to laugh right in the face of adversity. The third observation I made about life, viewing life from my hearse, is in this world you're going to have trouble. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't care the color of your skin or whether you're from Reynolds, Georgia or Atlanta, Georgia. Things ain't going to always go your way. And I've observed that viewing life from my hearse. The fourth observation I made is the only investments that matter when you're dead and gone and some crazy guy like me or Rick Williams hauls you off are the investments you make in people. At the end of the day, we don't have a U-Haul going to that cemetery. Don't matter how much money doesn't matter how much money you have or what you have, the investments you leave in people will live on after you're dead and gone. But when I view life from a hearse, what I really mean is that I view life with the end in mind, and that's why I'm here today. And I want you, if you would, to honor God by standing for the reading of God's Word. Would you do that? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world. And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, and his own did not receive him. Yet to those who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become children of God. Children not born of natural descent or human decision, but born of God. The Word became flesh and lived for a while among us. And we've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, "It is he of whom I said, when I said, he who comes after me surpasses me because he was before me." From the fullness of his grace, we have received one blessing after another. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God. And that's what we are. The reason the world doesn't know us is because it did not know him. Dear friends, now we're children of God. but what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. This is how he showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world for us to live through him. This is love. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and gave his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Since God so loved us, let us also love one another. The Lord is your refuge and strength. He's an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way, and the mountains fall in the heart of the sea, though its rivers roar and foam, and the mountains quake at their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High lives. God is within her, she will not fall. God is within you, you will not fall, he will help you at the break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Boy, they are, aren't they? Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with you. The God of Jacob is your fortress. So bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget none of his benefits. He pardons all our iniquities. He heals all our diseases. He redeems our life from the pit. He crowns us with loving kindness and compassion. He satisfies our years with good things so that our youth may be renewed like the eagle. The Lord performs passionate deeds to those who are oppressed. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the sons of Israel. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness. He has not dealt with us according to our sins, nor has he rewarded us according to our iniquities. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his loving kindness toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. For he himself knows our frame. He is mindful that we are but dust. But as for a man, his days are like grass. As a flower of the field, he flourishes. And when the wind has passed over it, it is no more, and its place acknowledges it no longer. But the loving kindness of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting, and his righteousness to children's children, to those who fear him and remember his precepts to do them. Let's pray. The words of Paul: for this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom the whole family in heaven and earth derives its name. I pray out of his glorious riches that he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how high and wide and long and deep is the love of God, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled to the measure with all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more we can ask or think, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus and in the Senate of the great state of Georgia, and to all generations. Amen and amen. Thank you.
It is always a pleasure to have the doctor of the day. I'm going to pinch hit for our senator from the 6th right now. He's off the floor, but Dr. Randy Reiser is here with us today, and we greatly appreciate all our physicians who come down here and volunteer their time here at the Capitol, and glad that Dr. Reiser could join us today. And at this time, let's give Dr. Reiser a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. As a physician, I just want to tell you what an honor it is to be here today, and I want to thank you for all you do to maintain the most important thing in terms of maintaining the citizens, the health of the citizens in Georgia, and that is supporting the doctor-patient relationship. As a Army veteran, I also want to thank you for everything that you do for our veterans and our families. I look forward to serving you today. Thank you.
Are there any unanimous consents? Chair hears none. Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? I recognize the senator from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to welcome the men of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, founded January 5, as we say J5, 1911, in Indiana University, through the wisdom and guidance of our dreamer, Elder Watson Diggs, founded on the University of Indiana campus. It is committed to social fraternity, but also community service, and above all, achievement. Why do I say achievement? When you look at the persons who have been part of this noble clan, whether we're talking about in politics, John Conyers, Ralph Abernathy, talking about in the law, Johnny Cochran, or sports, Wilt Chamberlain, this fraternity represents men of achievement. But what is most impressive about this fraternity is not the individual accolades, but its dedication to service, its dedication to the community, but also where it is from. Because on January 5, 1911, in Indiana University, the state of Indiana was one of the strongholds of the Ku Klux Klan. The state of Indiana, outside of the South, had more lynchings to take place in the United States. The state of Indiana, during that time, had some of the strongest Jim Crow laws outside of the South. But through that cauldron of hate and fear rose the men of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. And so therefore, when we talk about achievement, it's not about individuals. It's about the genesis, the birth of this fraternity. It comes from achievement. And with that, I would hope that everyone would please welcome the men of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity who are sitting up in the balcony and also to the side. And please welcome these men of achievement, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. And with that, Mr. President, I yield well.
Recognize the senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I got good news this morning. We have a budget, but it's not finalized yet. That being said, we're still working on the 24 as well. Subcommittee chairs, please listen to me for a second. Subcommittee chairs. Angela downstairs in my office is working now to help schedule your subcommittee meetings on the FY24 budget. She's working, and we're trying to get those scheduled Wednesday and Thursday of next week, looking at the fact that we've only got about 25 days left before we adjourn sine die. So if you are a subcommittee chair, please, please, please go down by my office when we have a break, call Angela when we have a break, and let's go ahead and get the 24 subcommittee appropriations meetings set so that we can be ahead for next week. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Recognize the senator from the 56th. Recognize the senator from the 56th. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is EMS Day. I hope some of you went downstairs to meet with our men and women who are EMTs and paramedics who are in every one of your districts and communities. Today, we recognize the over 26,000 people who are there serving you each and every day. For those of us that have either performed that service or you've been needing their service, you know how important they are. I think we got a great view of that just 2 months ago today, while during Monday Night Football, star player for the Buffalo Bills, Damar Hamlin, literally died on the field. He went into full cardiac arrest. Had it not been for a coach to come out to start CPR and then EMS personnel to continue both CPR and use an AED to bring him back to life, Damar wouldn't be with us here today. So please take a moment to find these fine men and women, shake their hand, and say thank you for literally saving lives. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? You have before you a consent calendar or privilege resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none, and the resolution on the consent calendar is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw and commit? I recognize the senator from the 29th for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that SB 222 be engrossed.
The senator has requested for Senate Bill 222 to be engrossed. We do have objection from the minority leader. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 222 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to primaries and elections generally, so as to provide that all costs and expenses relating to election administration are paid for with lawfully appropriate public funds to provide for related matters. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from the 29th to speak to the motion. He waives. Recognize the senator from the 55th to speak to her objection. You waive? All right. So we're at the posture now where we will take a vote on this. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All those in favor signify by voting the yay switch, and those against voting the nay switch. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 32 and the nays are 19. The motion has prevailed. We are now heading to the rules calendar. Senate Bill 109. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 109 by Senator Eccles of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to medical assistance generally so as to require the Department of Community Health to include continuous glucose monitors as a pharmacy benefit for Medicaid recipients. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize the senator from the 49th to speak to the bill. Or would you? I know this is the senator's first bill, and we're kind of having a hard time finding her right now. So
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true the senator from the 49th is AWOL at this time? We think she's in prayer because this is her first bill.
She's a little concerned, Senator. She's a little concerned.
Freshman fears. No, the first bill.
I'll call on the senator. I know the chairman of that committee, senator from the 1st. He's willing to pinch hit for her. So I recognize the chairman from Savannah, Georgia, to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a simple, straightforward bill. It has to do with Medicaid benefits relating to continuous glucose monitors. Of course, we would love for every diabetic patient to have a continuous glucose monitor, but this is narrowly defined relating to this bill, and that's basically what it does. I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. President. If not, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
You have no questions, Senator. Does any senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Hey, there's the senator from the 49th. Let's give her a round of applause, everybody. Senator, you welcome to speak to your bill, but I think it's already got on a pretty good track right now. You'll waive? All right. We'll save it for another day, Senator. So, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 52nd, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, isn't it true that I'm doing a really poor job of shepherding the two freshmen on each side of me this session?
The senator knows of what he speaks. No question. You got two. You got your hands full back there, Senator. So, On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. On to the next bill, Senate Bill 106. Oh yeah, congratulations, Senator. You passed your first bill. You passed your first bill without coming to the well or even speaking for it. Congratulations. Senate Bill 106. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 106 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to medical assistance generally so as to provide for a 3-year pilot program to provide coverage for remote maternal health clinical services under the Medicaid program. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 106, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to medical assistance generally so as to provide for a 3-year pilot program to provide coverage for remote maternal health clinical services under the Medicaid program. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 20th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is my 8th session. I think I've been through 2 or 3 special sessions, but I learned something every day just about up here, but certainly every session, and I learned something just now. I did not realize that we could have a proxy present our bill. So, Mr. President, would it be all right for the senator from the 1st to present this for me? He's got a great track record, yes, Senator. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of great things happening in Georgia. We're really proud of the progress the state has made in the last really 20 years of good leadership. But economic development, success, a lot of industry announcements, job growth, those kind of things. But sadly, Georgia continues to lag the nation in healthy birth outcomes for both mothers and babies. We have taken steps in the last few years to make improvements in these areas by extending Medicaid coverage to mothers for 12 months after the birth of the baby. This is another measure to try to improve our birth outcomes. Healthcare before and during and after pregnancy can help identify and manage conditions that contribute to preterm birth and other adverse outcomes. According to the March of Dimes, in an average week in Georgia, 2,355 babies are born. Of these babies, on average, weekly, 283 are born preterm, before 37 weeks of pregnancy, and 252 babies are born at low birth weight, under 5.5 pounds. Of the 2,355 babies born weekly in Georgia, according to the March of Dimes, only 1,797 of these mothers receive adequate prenatal care. Georgia preterm births accounted for 11.9% of all births, which earned Georgia a grade of F on the 2022 March of Dimes report card. 53% of Georgia counties have low or no access to maternity care. I believe that we have 60 or so counties that have no OBGYN. Some of our counties don't even have a primary care physician. What this bill does is it directs, you'll see on line 30, it directs the Department of Community Health, and I've been meeting with them about this, and I've met with our former Senate colleague who is now the Chief Medical Officer at DCH, Dr. Burke. It directs DCH to develop and implement a pilot program during fiscal years 2025, 2026, and 2027 to provide remote maternal health clinical services to recipients of medical assistance whose health care provider identifies them as someone who may experience a high-risk pregnancy. The criteria to participate in the program, you'll see on line 39, it starts to list out the eligibility to participate in the pilot. The recipient would have to be pregnant. Their health care provider would have to determine that remote maternal health clinical services are in the best interest of the patient, and the health care provider determines that they have a high risk at risk for a high risk pregnancy, and all of those categories are listed on line 47 through 54. And on line 55, and this is important, the recipient lives in a county without a licensed OBGYN who participates in the state Medicaid program. So this is a pilot program to use telehealth, telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, and to see if that gives us better outcomes on our births. I would appreciate the support of this bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You have no questions, Senator.
All right, I yield the well. Thank you.
Does any senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea, opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Moving on, Senate Bill 92. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 92 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 18 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to general provisions regarding prosecuting attorneys so as to create the Prosecuting Attorneys Oversight Commission, to provide for definitions, to provide for the powers, composition, appointment, and confirmation of such commission. The Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland as 17th District Chairman. Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 92, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 18 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to general provisions regarding prosecuting attorneys so as to create the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission, to provide for definitions, provide for the powers, composition, appointment, and confirmation of such commission. Senator Albers of the 56 and others offer the following amendment, Amendment 1, to amend Senate Bill 92 by deleting citizen from line 93, inserting a period after the word section on line 37, and deleting provided, however, that such standards and rules shall be effective only upon review and adoption by the Supreme Court from lines 137 and 138. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 29th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. everybody should be familiar with this bill. We passed it out of here last session, went over to the House. They added a little weight to it, sent it back over, and myself and the senator from the 20th weren't quite good enough at getting that weight off, so I think it ended up languishing on the table at the end of last session, if my memory does not escape me. But SB 92 is the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission legislation. What this does is it creates the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission, which will have the power to discipline, remove, and cause involuntary retirement of appointed or elected district attorneys or solicitors generals. And of course, it provides grounds for disciplines of district attorney or solicitor general, or his or her removal or involuntary retirement from office. Friends, as most of you know, I know in this chamber we have a law enforcement officer, a juvenile probation officer, and a gaggle of attorneys. And so most of those individuals and a lot of the other experts in the room are extremely familiar with the criminal justice system. And here in Georgia and throughout the United States, we depend on a complex criminal justice system to keep our communities safe and to protect those charged with crimes through a fair and honest due process system. This system here in Georgia is comprised of thousands of individuals who are sworn to carry out the many tasks in varying jurisdictions throughout the counties and cities and judicial circuits here in the state of Georgia. The three primary components of the criminal justice system are the law enforcement side, the court side, and the corrections side. But what many need to understand is the court side involves judges, defense attorneys, and prosecutors. Very, if not the most important part of the process, where individuals have the right to stand up and fight for themselves if wrongly accused and if rightly accused, the opportunity to fight same, and the opportunity, hopefully, if found guilty, to get a fair and honest sentence, and hopefully rehabilitation, because part of corrections is to help those individuals not only serve their time safely, but to help them transition back into society once their sentence is over. Friends, this is a straightforward bill. So you have it in your book on the green sheet. I'm reading off LC 442314, S as in Sierra. If you'll see, starting on line 14, the bill details exactly what the prosecuting attorney qualifying commission's responsibilities will be. Also, looking at the same piece of legislation, if you go to line 52, you see who the individuals are that will serve on this commission. I don't know that we have another commission in the state of Georgia that has 100% peer review on it. If you'll see line 52, one attorney with prosecutorial experience as an elected district attorney or elected solicitor general. Line 56, one attorney with at least 5 years of service as an assistant district attorney or as an assistant solicitor general. Line 60, 2 practicing attorneys. Line 67, one attorney with at least 5 years of service as an assistant district attorney or assistant solicitor general. And then if you go to line 74, we talk about the commission's hearing panel, which sits underneath the commission. You have one elected district attorney or elected solicitor general. On line 78, one elected district attorney or elected solicitor general. And then the coup de grace on line 82, one former judge of the Superior Court or Court of Appeals or former justice who has at least 10 years of service as a judge and has formerly been a district attorney or solicitor. What this bill does is it provides not only the citizens that become involved voluntarily or involuntarily in the criminal justice system, and we all understand that many times the vast majority of that involvement is not voluntary, whether you are, or sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's not. Those who go out and commit crimes offer themselves up to the criminal justice system, and those who are victims of crimes become part of it, not by their own choosing. And so with having a commission in place to make sure the district attorney's office is doing its job, I think it's important. If we look at the other parts of the criminal justice system, as I said, there are layers upon layers upon layers of peer review, of professional services review, and other types of review of law enforcement in Georgia, which is one of the reasons why our Peace Officers Standards and Training Council here in the state of Georgia decertifies more law enforcement officers than any other state in the United States. Because thankfully our post council has a low tolerance for misbehavior by officers. Absolutely for intentional misbehavior, but also for those officers who fail to learn the policies and procedures of those agencies and operate outside of those policies and procedures. The Department of Corrections, with their post standards, are held to the same standards as law enforcement officers. The judges that serve in the middle leg of the criminal justice system, Superior Court judges, state court judges, and others, they have the JQC that comes in and reviews their actions. Georgia statute states very clearly what the responsibilities of a district attorney is and what the responsibilities of a solicitor general is. There are no hidden rules anywhere. There are no got yous anywhere in Georgia code. But we've had examples around the state, whether it was in Brunswick, when a district attorney who failed to do their job led to what I believe, to the death of 2 individuals on one occasion, and the death of another individual on another occasion. And at that time did not handle that case the way Georgia law prescribed a district attorney to handle that case, with looking at all aspects and determining if in fact, when bumped up against Title 16 in Georgia law, did the perpetrators in those cases in fact violate the law. We also had it in Columbus, Georgia, in the Chattahoochee Circuit, my district, where a gentleman elected as district attorney decided he would choose what laws he would prosecute during his campaign and once he got into office. And once he got into office, because he had ADAs in his office that didn't necessarily agree with everything, and I'm all for politicians, elected DAs and sheriffs and others having control of their office, but going in there and understanding that philosophically some of his ADAs didn't agree with him, terminated 17 experienced ADAs and brought in new ADAs that had to be trained with trial dockets about to explode moving into the pandemic, with cases that deserve speedy trials and proper attention. He ran on this track, and he ran on this track of reckless management of one of the busiest district attorney circuits in the state until he ran off the tracks, was indicted, and sentenced to a year in the Georgia Department of Corrections for a crime. And we have it in other communities here too. We have it in a community near our state university where somebody who is an elected DA says they can choose, not based on evidence, but based on how they feel and what their political leanings are as to who they will prosecute and who they will not. And in order to solve this problem, there needs to be oversight. And I think this is the cleanest, fairest, most honest way to provide that oversight. I want to thank those on the Judicial Committee and the chairman from the 17th for the intentional vetting they give on this bill. It's one of those committees that if you want to truly understand what vetting is, I encourage you to go there, sit there, be quiet and listen. They do a great job. But to my colleagues, I humbly ask that you support SB 92 to make our state a safer place and to balance out the accountability that is required, that is mandated within our criminal justice system. And with that, Mr. President, I'll stand for any questions, if I have any.
You do have some questions, Senator. Senator from the 17th, you wish to rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Does Senator yield?
I do yield, not knowing that you were going to ask me the first question after I talked about what a great chair you were.
Well, Senator, isn't it true that at first I think you called me a goose, talking about the gaggle of lawyers out here, but then you complimented me at the end, so I'm really happy right now. Isn't that true?
I guess as from a legal standpoint, I never use the word goose, and I think gaggle is open for interpretation. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Senator, how long have you worked on this issue?
This has been, I think, approximately 3 years. We started on this not long after I was elected to this office, when we had a district attorney here in Fulton County that attempted to prosecute and persecute law enforcement officers without due process.
You further yield?
I do.
Isn't it true that initially some people like me and also a lot of district attorneys in our state were opposed to this idea? Isn't that true?
Absolutely.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Isn't it true that since that time you worked with all of us and made changes to this bill, and in particular, as you mentioned, made certain that this oversight commission, or whatever we're going to call it now, is actually made up of the people that prosecute cases in our state? Isn't that true?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, to the point that if those will read the amendment, they'll see where I inadvertently left the word citizen in here when we were discussing having a citizen on the committee, and inadvertently left reference to that in another part of the bill, and we're asking on the amendment to have that removed, because we do not feel there is anyone more qualified to address complaints against the individuals that sit in these positions than other individuals that carry law degrees and understand the responsibilities of those positions.
And do you further yield for 2 more questions?
I do, Mr.
First
Chairman.
question is, 3 years ago when you first brought this issue up, how many elected district attorneys supported this bill?
2.
And last question is, today, after the work you've done these last 3 years, how many elected district attorneys now support this bill?
After a phone call I had this morning, I believe the number is 24.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Recognize the Senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I do.
Thank you. First of all, this is kind of a parliamentary question. Did you mention that we need an amendment today, or are you referring to on the citizen piece, or are you referring to the amendment that we made in committee?
There should be an amendment on your desk, Madam Chair, that discusses the amendment. They were passed out. If you don't have a copy, I don't understand why you wouldn't. They were brought about and placed on the desks.
I found it. Thank
Yes,
you very
ma'am.
much.
Thank
All right.
you.
So another question, if you'll yield.
Yes, ma'am.
Why does this new oversight commission not include all prosecuting officials in our state, including, which would also include the Attorney General and the prosecutors at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia?
My focus on this piece of legislation were on the district attorneys and solicitor general's offices.
Did you not think it was appropriate to include all prosecuting officials? I mean, I'm sure you're aware the JQC oversees all judges, not all of whom are attorneys, but this new commission leaves out prosecutors.
And Senator, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you before the next session and craft that language and make it a part of this new law.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And by the way, the amendment is on the lemonade colored sheet. Thank you.
Senator from the 19th, you were arrived on for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do, to the Mr. Dignified Appropriations Chair and Barrister.
Thank you so much. I'm part of that gaggle. The question I have, Senator, is as it relates from this bill to the Attorney General's office, does anything in this bill prevent the Attorney General's office from using all the resources available to it to force DAs to do their job?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, sir, it does not. And to that question, the incredible job done by the Attorney General is what led to the incredible turnaround that we had in the Chattahoochee Circuit District Attorney's Office. And if,
Recognize the senator from the 9th for a question.
Senator, do you yield?
yes, ma'am, I do.
Question: the appointment of commission members, they're going to be handpicked by the governor and by the majority party. My question is, that appears to be very partisan. Was there any consideration given to maybe offering or putting on the commission representation by the minority party?
No, ma'am.
Okay, is there, the senator yield?
I do.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes, ma'am, because what I did is I followed the guidelines that we've used on other appointments, on other legislation that's came to, on different commissions that allowed appointments. As a matter of fact, there were a couple of things that some other individuals encouraged me to change, not partisan political things, but I tried to stay consistent in how the appointments were made.
Is the senator yield?
Yes, ma'am.
But we are talking about fairness and balance, and we want to balance.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
And that's just my question. This seems very one-sided, and I'm concerned that we won't get balance.
Yes, ma'am.
If it is one-sided.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I didn't catch the question.
My question is, would you be willing to make an amendment to maybe have majority representation on that commission?
No, ma'am, I would not accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
And to help you maybe understand a little more is a few years ago when House Bill 143 was dropped across the way by the Democrats, it had the same appointment type language in it. So we just tried to stay consistent, ma'am.
Do you yield?
Yes, ma'am. I'll yield to one more question so that you and I don't.
So you do realize at some point the balance of power could shift. So I'm just trying to say, like, it looks good now, but it might not look good later.
Senator,
just a point to consider.
Senator, I absolutely appreciate that. Here's where politics does not belong. Politics does not belong in the criminal justice system. And when individuals bring politics into the criminal justice system with partisan district attorneys, partisan sheriffs, and all these other things, I'd be more than happy to sit with you or anyone else and write legislation that removes partisan politics from our criminal justice system entirely.
But this is a partisan bill, but thank you.
Thank you.
Senator, you have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well. And do I need to speak to the amendment?
You go ahead and speak to the amendment now if you like, Senator.
I'll briefly speak to the amendment. You should have it on your table. There's a correction on line 93 where we're extracting the word citizen from the document. There's some Scriveners. You'll see where we are inserting a period after the word section on line 137 and deleting what's on 37 and 38. And then if you jump down to 9 on the lemonade sheet, you will see we're deleting the hearing panel's order in a disciplinary and incapacitated hearing may be reviewed by the Supreme Court in accordance in order to make sure that we did not cross the wires in the three parts of our state government. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Senator from the 14th, like to rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Look forward to a substantial day of working with you all, and I'll try and keep this brief. I was one of 4 Democrats out of a caucus of over 70 in the Georgia House to vote for a previous version of this bill, and I got a lot of flack for it. So I want to start there so you understand that my approach to this bill is not myopic, it's not super hyper-partisan, it's just in response to the experiences I've had. I'm asking you to vote no. You won't, but the reason I'm asking you to vote no is because I think that the moment has changed since the death of Ahmaud Arbery in 2020 when we first started talking more seriously about prosecutorial oversight. And a very brief overview is the senator from the 29th is absolutely correct. There were both Republicans and Democrats who were talking about failures by some prosecutors in the summer of 2020. And that was an obvious point at that time because we had a prosecutor who needed to be removed down in the Brunswick area when the murder occurred, and she was trying to cover it up. And there are other DAs throughout the state, both Republican and Democratic, that I know that their local delegation might have issue with. I know there was some issue in Paulding County that legislators in the House were concerned about. But here's what I'm concerned about. There's a difference between the genesis of a legitimate discussion where the policy question of what should be done about wayward prosecutors comes up. There's a difference between that moment and the moment we're in now. There was really one bill in the last few years, and I worked on this. I can show you the lines that Representative Burt Reeves and I frantically hashed out together in committee personally. I can show you the part of this I stayed up late helping to write, which added more protections like a sworn affidavit, making sure that the complaint process couldn't be abused. But it's not just this bill anymore. We now have several bills, when you look at both the House and the Senate, that are purporting to affect the way that prosecutors, DAs, and solicitors do their job in this state. You've got a recall bill, changing the percentage threshold from like 2 to 30%, right? Or excuse me, 30% to 2, got it backwards, to make it much easier to put the recall of a DA or solicitor on the ballot. You've got bills that would make the office of DA or solicitor nonpartisan. And this idea from the senator from the 29th, this narrative, this rhetoric that, well, we're putting partisan politics in district attorneys and solicitors' offices. They've been partisan. They've been partisan because there actually is some question of value judgment, policy judgment that goes into prosecution decisions. Marijuana or cannabis products are the flashpoint for this that's always the elephant in the room that nobody's speaking about. Because if you believe that the war on drugs should be prosecuted, if you believe that people should go to jail for minor weed offenses, that is a set of value judgments that's going to make you more likely to vote for a Republican prosecutor. We all know that. And if you disagree with that, you're more likely to vote for a Democratic one, and those values are reflected in the partisan identity of the candidates. I know partisanship has gotten out of hand in this country. We've become hyperpolarized, but that doesn't change the fact that there is a legitimate function for these offices to be responsive to voters in terms of the types of policies that they want to see. And I agree with the senator from the 29th about something important. If you are a duly elected DA, you cannot categorically refuse to enforce the law. You just can't do that. Valid laws that are not unconstitutional. You can't refuse to enforce laws. In fact, I helped write one of the provisions in here that says you can't do that. Lines 176 to 178 are a Burt Reeves McLaurin special. In committee, we decided together that this would be the right language, that if a prosecutor categorically announces that they're not going to enforce certain laws, that that's a violation of these rules. But I'll tell you what prosecutors should be able to do, and they do every day, and that's enforcement priorities. You've got a limited set of resources, you've got limited staff to prosecute cases. So there are some prosecutions that you're naturally going to prioritize over others. And there are plenty of prosecutors in our state, both Republican and Democratic, who think of it that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you in sum is there are legitimate discussions to be had about what the role of prosecution is, and we've got a state bar that is paying attention to whether prosecutors are doing that. We've also got voters who are paying attention to whether prosecutors are doing that. And these DAs and solicitors have to go answer their voters on a regular basis for all these decisions. But what I'm really worried about in this speech, the reason I'm giving it is more about conscience and it's more about just marking the moment. I'm really worried that as we lose social trust, as we increase down a path of hyperpartisanship, polarization, that we're going to use legitimate narratives like we hope that prosecutors are enforcing the law, but we're going to twist them and turn them into something else. And we're going to use a commission like this, potentially, to harass or put the fire under prosecutors of a certain party in certain urban areas, metro areas, that don't align with what state government wants. And I think it's dangerous if we let that political moment, there are a couple moments in here today that are frankly quite dangerous, right? Political moments where the one party's base is sort of whirring out of control, and that makes people in here feel like they have to be responsive in a way that is attacking or going after the cartoonish villain from the other party. And so I get that the rhetoric from the majority today, the defense of this bill is going to be, don't worry, this is neutral language, we're going to use it in a neutral way. But I really do worry about our political moment. And I'm asking you, at least, if you're going to vote yes on this today, at least please keep a watchful eye that we're not going down this path of creating more and more state government apparatuses to try to control local officials, control the minority party, and ignore the will of what local voters want, a theme that might come up again later today. I thank you for your attention this morning. I'm looking forward to a day of hard work. Thanks, Mr. President. Yield the well.
You do have questions, Senator.
Sure, I'll take questions. That's fine. I'll take one.
Senator from the second, Ulysses Rise.
Oh, my man.
Does the senator yield?
To you always.
Senator, is it not true that this bill does not address the funding disparities that district attorneys face from county commissions who have to approve their budgets? And so if we are serious about district attorneys prosecuting crimes in this state, shouldn't we appropriate money from the General Assembly to help them do that?
Two really good points that the senator makes. The first one is that so often it's not a question of jacking up penalties, making new crimes, acting tough on crime. It's a question of actually funding enforcement for the laws we've already got. That is really the solution to crime that we need to be looking at. Number two, the point that the senator makes is that all of this is inherently local. The way that DAs, solicitors charge crimes is based on their relationship to their community. It's not based on whether you can muster a statewide majority of one party or another. The question is, what do those voters in that community want? And I think that with a couple exceptions, we've had some prosecutors go really off the rails, but that doesn't mean that we need this whole new statewide apparatus to police every prosecutor more closely. So I think the senator's points are well taken. If there are no further questions, Mr. President, I'll yield the
You
floor.
have one more question, Senator.
Okay, well, I want to be polite and answer questions, so I'll
Yes,
take
sir.
one more.
Yes, sir. That's the last one. Senator from 46.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I sure do.
All right, so I get your concern about local control, but we're talking about local officials that are enforcing state laws that we pass. What else can we do if we have locally elected officials that deem their locality is immune from our state law, and they want it to be different and just not prosecute entire categories of laws, which is much different than individual prosecutorial discretion, deciding which individual to prosecute under the same laws. But when they have a blanket refusal to enforce state law in accordance with their oath of office, what else can we do if we don't have some type of oversight to compel them to follow the law?
And I think, to your point, Senator, a slightly different variation of this happened in the summer of 2020 when it wasn't a categorical refusal to prosecute, but it was an obviously morally deficient choice not to prosecute a case. And then the same question arose. What do we do in a circumstance like that? Now, the State Bar's answer was, we have oversight over their law licenses. We can enact our own sanctions based on that. And of course, the response to that was, well, it's too slow, right? We haven't seen the action quickly enough that we need to develop the rules, whatever, and the State Bar is still crunching away at that. But I think the real answer is, we have enshrined in our Constitution, the Georgia Constitution, that DAs are constitutional officers. They're accountable to their voters. And I understand the frustration of state lawmakers, because I am one, when you feel like something's happening at the local level that you don't agree with. That being said, that's why I'm not saying vote no or, the entire world will crumble. I mean, I worked on this bill, the House version of it. All I'm trying to do today is mark for everybody the danger, the potential precariousness of using a narrative like that to start doing a wholesale shift away from the way we've been doing prosecution. And that's why I mentioned the other bills, because I think partisanship, taking away partisanship from these positions, decreasing recall thresholds, it's all really part of the same moment, the same story. And I think it's just a testament to how even neutral laws that might have a legitimate purpose, like the one you described, can be abused if we let our hyper-partisanship sort of motivate too much of our actions. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from 36.
Thank you. To the Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Just a short question. Are you aware of any other commission established under state law that has 12-year terms?
I'm not, and I think those folks who run for the PSC, because it's such a sweet gig, might have to reconsider after they see this bill pass.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Whether there are questions or not, I am going to yield the well. Thanks, Mr. President.
I think you got one more question, Senator. I think it'd be a friendly question, too.
Mr. President, I am new here, and I yield to the more mature and wise members who want to do this dialogue.
Sure. Senator from 42nd, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Senator, isn't it true that the General Assembly actually has impeachment power over prosecutors?
That is also true, and I think that's another great point about when these egregious and rare circumstances come up, there are remedies that are available already.
So isn't it true that elected prosecutors are already accountable to, in addition to the voters, the State Bar, the Attorney General, in terms of criminal prosecution if they do violate any laws, and the legislature in terms of impeachment?
That's exactly right, Madam Chair. And as we saw specifically with the Ahmaud Arbery case, once there's some transparency and the information comes to light necessary to make the case, public opinion is often overwhelming, and there's often a political process that can be managed with political will to get the job done, to get that person removed.
It's a great point, the last point you made, but imagine an instance where that had not happened, and there's frustration out of state lawmakers that state laws are being not followed appropriately. Sounds like there has been some frustration. Have you seen any district attorney be called up, any impeachment charges be filed by any member of the General Assembly during the discussion on this issue over the last 3-4 years? Actually, it's been longer, 8 years?
No, Madam Chair, and I think to your point, sometimes we create duplicative processes for the purposes of our politics when we already have processes at our disposal that could be used to achieve the same outcome.
I think that's a great point. Another question, if you'll yield. Isn't it true that this particular new oversight commission will cost $1.5 million?
I think the chairwoman knows of what she speaks. I have not. I stopped taking math classes in high school, Madam Chair, and I went straight to the North Campus UGA. So.
Is it not true that most district attorney offices are already strapped for resources and funding, many in near crisis mode with understaffing and a lack of ability to retain talent because of lower wages than other governmental and private counterparts?
That I've definitely heard, Madam Chair. Yes.
Why do you think this bill leaves out certain classes of prosecutors from the Oversight Commission, such as the Attorney General prosecutors and the prosecutors at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia?
Madam Chair, I think one possible explanation for that, and of course I can't know for sure, is that this type of a bill is about targeting oversight more at political enemies, or it could be used that way, than an actual attempt to capture every prosecutorial agency or body in the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. President, I'm at your disposal.
Senator from the 6th, I'd like to ask you a couple questions.
Does the gentleman yield?
Still yielding.
Thank you. Isn't it true that in addition to the tools highlighted by the senator from the 42nd, that there are also mandamus actions that can be brought against prosecutors?
So if a prosecutor is violating a duty in a clear way, which I think is the type of case we're talking about, the more egregious circumstances, any citizen has standing to bring what's called a mandamus action to compel that prosecutor to comply with the law.
Thank you. And does the gentleman further yield?
I do, yes.
Isn't it true that the concern here is that this commission can be used to make more value political calls on decisions, such as the decision to prosecute an officer versus not prosecute an officer, like the DA decided in the Rashard Brooks case?
The senator's making an excellent point, and I've tried to be measured in my tone today, so I hope you appreciate when I say this emphatically. I think it is unquestionable that one consequence of this bill is that prosecutors are going to add a layer of political concern to almost every big decision that they make because of the risk that a commission might come knocking if there is a party, a complainant that feels that they did not exercise the duties of their office correctly. So I think, the real worry is that this has a chilling effect as well, where prosecutors don't feel free, as they're constitutionally mandated to do, to exercise their discretion to prioritize enforcement the way that they wish. So that's something that's going to limit the discretion of every prosecutor in the state, and that's the type of preemption that I'm trying to warn against. So thanks, Senator. I've been trying to leave the well so earnestly, Mr. President. I would ask your permission to leave the well at this point, unless you think there are other questions we're taking, Mr. President. Okay, I just yield. Thanks so much.
Senator, you finally have no more questions. So, Senator has yielded. Senator from the 22nd, I'd like to rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise in opposition to this bill, but I do hope that persons actually give attention to this, because it's not quite from the angle that you may be looking at. It's a little bit. This bill, without a doubt, is unnecessary government overreach. And it's not because of political parties or prosecutors' discretion. It's just because the bill itself has significant flaws that shows why it's significant overreach and unnecessary. Quite frankly, we go 6.5 pages before we even get to why we're here. 6.5 pages before we even find out why we're actually creating this commission. We detail the different oversight, hearing committees. We talk about who's going to be on it, what happens if a vacancy happens, what happens if a vacancy doesn't happen. But we never find out until 6.5 pages in, why are we even doing this? And when we find out why we're actually doing it, we start seeing significant problems and issues beyond, it doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat or anything of that nature, it's just very significant issues. So let's kind of go through it. On page 6, when we look at line 145, when we start talking about grounds for discipline of the solicitor and the district attorney, now we understand that, and this is going to be important, because what I think is going to end up happening is we're really not going to have a bill if this goes through. And all the things that you want to have happen aren't going to happen. Because remember, this commission is going to actually draft basically the rules, and then from there, the Supreme Court, I think based on the new amendment, which is just another layer of government, basically have to approve it. And I think what you're going to find is when they start creating these rules, they're going to narrow this stuff so far down that you're really not going to have a bill. And it'll be our choice what to do from there. So first, when we start looking at page 145, it says the DA or solicitor can be removed from mental or physical incapacity interfering with the performance of his or her duties, which is likely to become permanent. Do you mean disability? We're talking about disability, which is protected under the federal law and Georgia state law? Is that what we're talking about? Now you're going to say, no, I don't mean that. Well, what's going to have to happen is once this commission grabs this and starts looking at it, none of that's going to, you cannot suspend someone for a disability. As you realize now, even drug use is now actually becoming part of disability. You cannot do that. And when you say it interferes, of course it interferes if you do not give them reasonable accommodation. Of course their disability, that's what you're talking about, will interfere with their job if you don't give them reasonable accommodation. So what's going to happen is the commission is going to have to fix this, because right now it's not legal. And when they do that, everything that you thought you created is going to be narrowed down to nothingness. They're going to have to do that. Otherwise, they're going to get sued. I know what you think you're doing by this, but as I just said, disability now is even including alcohol use and drug use. You're creating something that's going to be actionable. Well, the commission's going to know that, the Supreme Court's going to know that, and they're going to make an exception and say, if you have a disability, you have to have ADA compliance, you cannot basically make somebody leave, and what happens to your number one then? It's going to be completely gutted. It's not going to exist. Then we go to number 2, willful misconduct. What is that? So let's assume willful misconduct is a crime. We won't talk about conviction of a crime because that's covered, which we'll talk about. Well, let's say it's being indicted of a crime. We have a statute that covers that. There's a statute already that covers being indicted of a crime. That exists today. So if we're talking about willful misconduct and we're talking about an indictment, this already exists. And you know what? We already acknowledge that it exists because in here we say subject to OCGA 45-5-6. It takes precedence. So if a person is indicted, when you start talking about willful misconduct in office, it means nothing. Those procedures already exist. They're there. So the only other thing you can possibly start talking about is what, personal conduct? Because if you're talking about being indicted for something, that's covered. So now what are you talking about, personal conduct? Is that where we're heading to now? And then once again, because of all sorts of privacy issues and all sorts of things, the commission is going to say, we really don't know what they mean by willful conduct, because if it's an indictment, that's already covered. Do they mean personal conduct? And they start listing out personal conduct that we don't have any control over. We're just handing this bill over to a commission. They're basically going to write this bill, which probably isn't even constitutional, because there's so many holes in it. They're going to have to fill this in. What is willful misconduct? And you say, well, it's an indictment. No, it's not, because if it's an indictment, that's already covered. Well, it's a conviction. No, it's not, because it's a conviction, that's already covered. It's something else, and nobody has the slightest clue what it is. And you can jump up here and make all kind of stuff up. It's not in this bill. And you're going to cede that to the commission. That's what you're doing. They're writing this legislation. Now, it says, with respect to district attorneys' willful and persistent failure to carry out duties pursuant to 1586, I'll be back to that. Conviction of a crime of moral turpitude, as I already said, all felonies are considered to be moral turpitude in Georgia. Every single felony. That's why persons can't vote if they get a felony. It's already done. You're done nothing with that. That means nothing. That's already done. They leave office, they're out, kaput, you're gone. That means nothing. That's a nothing section. That's already covered by the law. Conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice, which brings the office in disrepute. Once again, very vague general terms. Really goes back, there really is combined with willful conduct is really what it really is, and I've already discussed that. And then we talk about knowing, authorizing, permitting the assistant district attorney. That basically is a catch-all, basically including assistance and everything we just talked about. So within this section right here, we really have created nothing new. There's nothing new. If you're indicted, we have a procedure for that. If you convicted of felony, you're out. That's already done. If we start talking about, well, we did create something new, because basically we're about to remove people for legal disabilities, so that's new. But you have legal disabilities, which is going to be covered, because the commission's going to cover it, and they're going to narrow that down to basically nothing. This section does nothing. Now, what will happen here is, person will run up here and give an example, one example, and say, well, see, this or this. Then I ask this question. If you're stretching to find that, why are we creating this commission? Is that stretch of that one example worth all of this bureaucracy? As you're stretching to find that example, to prove a point, is it worth all of this bureaucracy? That's the question. That is the question. So the example kind of is your commission that gets created. District Attorney Jones, he got indicted. Okay, let's go investigate. Oh, we already got a law for that. District Attorney Jones, he was found guilty of a crime of moral turpitude, felony. Oh, let's go investigate. Oh, he's already packing his bags, he's out. District Attorney Jones had a car accident, and he right now, he can't use his arms as well as he can. Let's go investigate. Well, you know, that's disability, you can't do that. What are you doing here? And so you're going to find that one example, but is it worth all of this gigantic bureaucracy that we're creating? So then let's also go to line 161, because this becomes important too. When we start talking detail, because this is also going to narrow down the complaints that you can have, because this becomes important. One of the things about willful misconduct, let me kind of back up. We talked about it being an indictment. I'll give you another example. What if we're talking about personnel issues? That could be willful misconduct without a doubt. Well, number two things with that. Number one, I would expect the commission would deal with that and probably stay away from personnel issues. They'll let the county handle that. But you can use your own imagination and talk about what that might be. But it's something very important here, where it says a sworn affidavit detailing the personal knowledge. You realize how restrictive that is? And it probably should be restrictive. But so if you're talking about a personnel issue, let's assume the commissioner says personnel issue can come up. And that personnel issue, though, goes through the county. And the county handles it, and basically they create a confidential agreement. Well, the only person who knows personal knowledge about that personnel issue, they're not coming forward. They're done with it. So once again, your willful misconduct doesn't exist. Who's going to do the affidavit of personal knowledge? There's no one there who has any personal knowledge of any of this. So by doing this, which is actually a good thing, you've narrowed it down of who actually can file any complaints. Now let's go to line 169. When we start talking about charging decisions, which is really why we're here, charging decisions. And we say charging decisions are not actionable unless we can show that it is plausible that the district attorney or solicitor general made or knowingly authorized the decision based on, and we'll talk about that. Let's understand something. There's nothing in the plausible. We have just created another cause of action. Do you realize there's no such thing as plausible cause in Georgia? What is that? What is plausible cause? I heard of probable cause. I've heard of reasonable suspicion, but there's no such thing as plausible cause. We've just created a new standard of how to judge persons. And nobody in Georgia has the slightest clue what plausible cause is. Not a single lawyer, because it doesn't exist. And you can go look up case law after case law after case law. There's not any case that's going to define plausible cause. What are we doing? And so this commission, like I said, they're writing this bill. Make no mistake. Because they're going to look at this and say, we have no clue what they're talking about. We know what probable cause is. We know what reasonable suspicion is. But basically, that's what you're saying. What is plausible cause? So they go rewrite it. They're writing this. They're doing this. But it gets worse. So we say we're not going to look at charging decisions, and that's really why we're here, charging decisions, right? If there's plausible cause, our new creation, unless we can show the decision was based on undue bias or prejudice against the accused. Gotcha. Or the district attorney basically acted in favor of persons with interests adverse to the accused. You mean domestic violence victims? Is that who you're talking about? Because it says or. Undue bias or prejudice against the accused, okay, I got that, race, sex, whatever it may be. But then it says or, you actually are siding with someone who has interest against the accused. You mean somebody who's when you got a man and a woman and there's no witnesses, and the prosecutor has to take somebody's side, and he takes the domestic violence victim's side, this now is actionable? Do you realize that's what you're saying here? This is what you're saying? And so now, once again, you're going to say, well, the commission, they'll fix it. And they're going to say, except for domestic violence cases, except for this, and except for that. Why are we even, we might as well just form a commission and say, y'all write the bill. Because that's what they're about to do. Which I'm not even sure we can do that. Now, undisclosed financial interest in the outcome of a prosecution. That's the second time we can look at charging decisions. What are you talking about, bribery? We have laws for that. There's already a law in place for that. When you start talking about undisclosed financial interest in the outcome of prosecution. Or are you talking about somebody owns a DUI center? And so basically they're prosecuting people and putting them in DUI court? Is that what you're talking about? You can't do, that's already forbidden. What, they own a probation company? And they're putting people through courts to get them go to their company? That's already forbidden. And if it's not, we can make a law against it. We don't need a whole bureaucracy to know that. So what are you talking about? You're either talking about bribery or somebody owns something that they're actually trying to put people into their system. You can't do that now. Undisclosed conflict of interest. Now, this does kind of go to the Ahmaud Arbery situation. If we're talking about money, we've already dealt with that. But this is an easy fix. You don't need all this bureaucracy for that. If you're talking about an undisclosed conflict of interest to where somebody does not get prosecuted, like in the Ahmaud Arbery situation, or somebody did get prosecuted. Let's assume we're not talking about financial interest. Somebody knew somebody or whatever it was. We can solve that easily. Make that a crime. I have no problem with that. In other words, if you have a conflict of interest and you prosecute somebody because of that conflict of interest, charge them with a felony. We don't need all this to do that. If you charge someone because you got a conflict of interest and you charge somebody with a crime because of that conflict, charge them with a felony. We can make that law, and I'll work with you on it. If you refuse to charge someone because you got a conflict of interest, and then later, and possibly within that bill, we could say that person is later prosecuted, charge them for a felony. We can do that. But you don't need all this. You don't need 6.5 pages of just stuff till you finally get to the meat and potatoes. And then after you finally do that, it is another 3.5 pages of bureaucracy after that. And then finally we get to the big one. The big one. You cannot have a stated policy which demonstrates the district attorney categorically refuses to prosecute and all that kind of stuff. You realize that already exists? OCGA 15.18.6. The requirement of a district attorney and solicitor general says the same thing. You are required to draw up all indictments or presentments when requested by the grand jury and to prosecute all indictable offenses. Do you understand what that means? It's not indicted offenses, it's indictable offenses. Meaning, if you got something sitting in your office and it's indictable, or in the case of a solicitor, you can charge an accusation, you are charged by Georgia law today to file that case. That already exists. You haven't found anything. There's no eureka moment. Oh, we got him now. We just found something. That already exists. And there's a remedy for that, which is called the impeachment process. And if we want to start establishing another remedy, we could do that too. But that does not say indicted. It says indictable. So if you have a case in your office that is indictable, you have to indict it. If you have a case in your office that have an accusation, you have to accuse it. Now from there, you can use your discretion to dismiss it. From there, you can use your discretion to put them in diversion court, but that is your obligation. It exists today. You have not found anything. There's been no eureka moment, and if that was not pursued, then that's the fault of the legislature. And if a prosecutor was sending out these edicts, they were wrong. Doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or Republican, they were wrong. They were wrong based on a law that's been in existence since at least 2010. And that is why I'm standing opposing this. We don't need this bureaucracy for that. For what we're proposing here, it's not as complicated as you really think it is. Most of this already exists. Some of the things that you're providing for are illegal, quite frankly. And the commission, they're going to narrow all of that down. But then at the end, the last page of this, you don't know whether to laugh or just throw your head down in your hands. This is what's so ridiculous about all of it. Prosecutors are out of control. They're running amok. Georgia's at risk. And we are not taking the first complaint until July 1st, 2025. Georgia is at risk. Prosecutors are just running wild. Prosecutors gone wild. And we're not taking the first complaint until July 1st, 2025. And the fact of the matter is, all the things that we're trying to prevent, either we can actually create a law. As I said, we could. If you're telling me that somebody prosecutes somebody because of a conflict of interest, make that law. Let's make it. Let's tighten it up. Let's make that law, and let's charge that prosecutor. If you're telling me that somebody is not being prosecuted, I'm not talking about we already got the law about the money aspect, but somebody's not being prosecuted because they know somebody, and that person is later prosecuted, make that law. But guess what? That law ain't going to be made because we're going to sit here and wait till July 1st, 2025 to create this bureaucratic nightmare. Person, if they're a solicitor, if they're a DA, they come on, they come off. If this happens, they're on and they're off. We don't need it. And in this situation, that's why I said, I hope that you're actually listening. This isn't about party. When I first approached this issue, yes, it was all, oh, they don't want Democrats to be prosecutors and all of that. But the more I got into this, I was like, this is not good. It's not a good bill. It just isn't. It's not good for the Republican prosecutors, it's not good for the Democrat, it's not good for the public. Because some things, if they're not actionable right now, we could solve this with a legislation over the summer, and we could put that legislation enacted next year. But according to this, we got to wait till July 1st, 2025. So if some of these problems exist, and I sit up here and gave you some of the remedies, we're going to wait to remedy the situation. So we got prosecutors out there. You're telling me we got prosecutors out there that own probation companies and putting people through probation, and we're not going to do anything about it July 1st, 2025? That's where we are? This isn't a good bill. That's why I'm asking you not to vote for it. And with that, Mr. President, I yield for any questions.
Senator, you do have a couple questions. Senator from the 46, you wish to rise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you mentioned Title 15-18-6 that prohibits prosecutors from agreeing to blanket refusals to enforce the law. I have one in the 46th district that on her first day in office issued a manifesto, a written document declaring that she would not prosecute people for drug possession, any type of drug. Nobody's enforced 15-18-6 now. Is this the impeachment process? That's never been done.
That's the impeachment process. Yes,
so
sir.
that is so cumbersome that
also,
we've never done it.
Or also, you could also go through, because if you look at the remedy, it's the impeachment process, but also says any other available remedy by law, which of course would be going to the state bar and showing that the person is not fulfilling their role as a prosecutor. And that's, we also know the state bar just created some more guidelines, 3.8 as far as prosecutors are concerned. But I think the key thing is that that already existed. And so that person, no matter who, would have been in violation of 15-8-6. So I get that the impeachment process may be cumbersome, but I also would say that under that enforcement level, it does say any other remedy at law, which of course would be the state bar, which is normally what would happen. And that happens all the time. Prosecutors get taken to the state bar many times. Many times.
Senator, further yield?
Yes, sir.
Would you explain that impeachment process to us? Because my understanding is it's never been done.
It has not been done, and it is very difficult. It's similar to normal impeachment process. What I would say is, and I looked at this, if that was the only remedy, I might agree, but it's not, because I think the correct remedy would be from a prosecutorial guideline to basically take the person to the state bar. And I think that would even be quicker than this oversight panel, quite frankly. This oversight panel will take more time than it'll take to file a bar complaint.
Senator, further yield a final question?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm an attorney in that circuit, and I'm going to be expected to take a bar complaint against my own DA that I have to appear and represent clients before in order to, I don't think that plays well with you when you're now have antagonized your own DA by filing a bar complaint against you.
But your attorney doesn't have to file that. In fact, most prosecutors will tell you that's members of the citizens that file against them. Attorneys don't file them, but citizens definitely do. I had a citizen file one because I dismissed his case. So, okay, so.
Yeah. With that, I'll sit down. Thank you, Senator.
Senator from the 37th, you wish to rise for a question?
Mr. President, gentlemen, yield?
Yes.
Appreciate your passion on the issue. I was, parenthetically, if you think we ought to do this sooner than 2025, perhaps we should offer an amendment to make this happen faster. I thought that your criticism of this being delayed was interesting to me, but I do want to just really direct a different question to you. Our system, as a General Assembly, creates a framework in which local governments, prosecutors, and others execute the business of government and justice. What is a citizen to do if the elected prosecutor in their jurisdiction doesn't prosecute the law? If a victim of any political party finds himself in a place where an elected prosecutor, with the mantle of being an elected prosecutor, determines that in this case or their particular case, the law's not worthy of being prosecuted with vigor. Our whole system is intended, is it not? And it's based on prosecutors prosecuting crimes with vigor, and the defense attorney defending the defendant. This adversarial system, is it not true, is intended and presupposes the prosecutor is going to vigorously prosecute the law. What is a victim intended to do under the system we have increasingly today, where prosecutors are not vigorously prosecuting the law?
Well, so we got two different things, because when you say categorically won't prosecute, I think we're probably talking about more the drug cases.
To be clear, not categorically not prosecute, but vigorously prosecute within the fullness of the law.
Now, so let's just kind of deal with it. Of course, we still have the bar situation. But number two, this is just me talking. I would be, unless shocked and disappointed, if a prosecutor is not prosecuting cases that have victims involved. For years, when I was solicitor, I wanted to create a domestic violence court. That was my number one passion. The case I'm most proud of, and I won't give the details, is the case that everybody told me to dismiss, and it dealt with a female victim on a case. And that was in like 2000. It's the most case I'm proud of. So if you give me a prosecutor that's not prosecuting cases with victims, they shouldn't be a prosecutor. And that victim ought to go out, that survivor, ought to go out and make it known that that prosecutor's not doing that. And they should be taken to task for it. But remember, they can also still go to the state bar. But I would be surprised and shocked if you had that happen.
Does the gentleman further yield one more
Yes.
question? My law enforcement agencies tell me all the time, Ed, when we stop enforcing small crimes, we stop enforcing reckless driving, we stop enforcing speeding in neighborhoods, we stop enforcing trespassing, vandalism, felony crimes rise. My concern is, and what we're seeing there, I think the wisdom behind Senate Bill 92 is that when prosecutors believe that turning their back on a category of crimes because they don't have the kind of victim that they're looking for, creates a sense in a community that the crime's not being prosecuted. It gives a green light to criminals, and I believe this begins to provide accountability for victims who may be the minority in their community and wanting to see crime prosecuted vigorously, but are helpless without some response by the General Assembly. This begins to address that issue, and I would ask for your support for it. So,
I would go back and say that this bill really doesn't do what you're saying in that sense, in that situation, because you always have prosecutorial discretion. Now, what we've been told is that this bill doesn't affect prosecutorial discretion. So if we're now saying what we've been talking about is categorically not prosecuting, we realize now that has never been the law. You can't do it. So once you take that out of the realm, because it shouldn't be doing that anyway, so a case gets charged, the prosecutor still has discretion on how they're going to do that case. So if we're saying, then I really got an issue with government overreach. Are we now saying that we're going to look at discretion of the prosecutor? They've charged the case. They've charged it. Do you realize that would mean going to each individual case and understanding each individual case before you could actually go into their discretion?
but isn't it true? We have elected judges that have a JQC that provides some level of oversight. To suggest that elected prosecutors, are absolutely independent with zero oversight of any kind structurally by this General Assembly, I think that's an oversight. I think no one should have absolute, unquestioned accountability. Is it not true? And I think isn't it true that this gives a structure to begin to provide some kind of accountability?
No, I would disagree with that. I think this structure is unwieldy, and I think it goes too far. And I think by the time they narrow all of these things down, we're going to realize, and I didn't realize to my colleague from the Senator from 42nd said it's $1.5 million, that we've just wasted a bunch of money. Mr. President?
Yeah, one more question.
Yes,
Senator from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
The gentleman yield.
Yes.
Didn't we just have an example that tells it all in Brunswick, Georgia, about the DA in Brunswick and the governor stepped in and did what he needed to do?
Well, yeah, the government stepped in and did what he needed to do, but I would say that shows, number one, you already have an investigatory process that exists, and then number two, it goes to my point, which is greater. We don't need this to solve that. We don't need an investigation. I'm telling you point blank, if you have district attorneys that are refusing to prosecute cases because of conflict of interest, they ought to be charged with a crime, and you don't need this unwieldy thing to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Senator from 56, would you like to speak at the wheel?
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, we have a system of accountability in place. Today we have police officers who go out and arrest people who are committing crimes, and they are governed under the Post Council. The Post Council is a group that provides accountability to them should there be a problem, an investigation is completed, and if they did something wrong, they could have their credentials either suspended or even removed. It's important to remind you that we suspend more credentials here than any other state in the union. Then if we continue down the process, we have attorneys. Attorneys are governed under the Georgia Bar Association, and if they do something wrong, they will have a hearing by the Bar Association of which could impact their ability to practice law. But then we skip one and go right to judges. For our judges, we have the JQC, the Judicial Qualifications Commission, who does the very same thing for oversight and accountability for judges. Well, we missed one in the middle, and those are the prosecuting and district attorneys. This is really very simple. Either you believe that everybody should be accountable or nobody should be. If somebody's doing their job, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Crime has gone up over the last several years and now is starting to come down a little bit. But we have had DAs, both in written and verbally, say they are not going to prosecute certain crimes. There's a solution for that if you're a district attorney. Quit. And don't run for office again, and join us here in the Georgia General Assembly to try and change the law. That is what a legislature does, not what a district attorney does. In fact, we've seen some across the nation where they stopped prosecuting all sorts of crimes, assault on police officers, and that's just simply wrong. So to my many friends and prosecutors out there, some that agree and some that disagree today, we're still going to work together, we're still going to battle crime, but let's move forward and do the right thing to provide transparency and oversight. I yield the will.
You have no question. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Got a late amendment being filed. After this vote, just as we're waiting on those amendments to get spread out across your desk here, we're going to break for lunch after this vote. So depending on how long this amendment takes, that is the plan. After this bill is completed, we'll break for lunch. Secretary, read the amendment.
Senator Tillery of the 19th and Robertson of the 29th offer the following amendment, Amendment 2, to amend Senate Committee Substitute to Senate Bill 92 by, on line 231, amend April 1st, 2024 to read October 1st, 2023. On line 232, amend April 1st, 2025 to read April 1st, 2024. On line 233 to amend July 1st, 2025 to read July 1st, 2024. On line 234, amend July 1st, 2025 to read July 1st, 2023. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 19th to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the debate on the bill. I think the senator from the 22nd brought a very valid point that this bill, this oversight committee, wouldn't even accept claims until 2025. So what this amendment does is backs that up. There were several things in the bill that were laid out by dates. The commission, it actually lays out when they will be appointed, when they'll have their rules done, when they'll accept complaints, and then how far back complaints could be filed too. And what this amendment does is backs all those up, but it doesn't back them up uniformly. It backs them up first on line 231, where you're talking about when the rules will be promulgated. It says, hey, we're going to back that up to October. 6 months later, by April 1st, 2024. Let's see, because that shall commence in October. The rules should be out by 6 months later, which will be April of 2024. Which then you should be able to file a complaint as of July 1st, 2024, and it should be able to date back to things that happened after July 1st, 2023. They may not accept complaints back until 24 when the rules are done and everything's done then. But if it's about actions that are happening now and we have an issue now, then let's allow that to go back to 2023. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure since this was originally proposed by the minority whip that there would be no questions, but I'd yield if there are any.
You do have one question. Good man from Savannah, Senator from 2nd.
Senator, do you yield?
Yes, sir. From my good
I
friend
trust
from-
I have just a friendly question for the senator. Senator, have you already made changes in the appropriations by changing the date on this and our already stretched budget?
The appropriations that would be due would only be, since they aren't laid out here, I would think that the only things that could be appropriated that would be appropriated concerning this bill would be per diems for members that were appointed. I don't think we've adjusted that. And since there's not an FY24 budget yet, and these would even be in an FY24 amended, I think we should be fine. Mr. President.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The senator from the 29th, would you like to close the debate?
Well, colleagues, I had to call my wife and tell her to cancel my River Center tickets because I've already been to the theater, and it was here today. So if we have laws on the book, we don't need anybody to enforce them. If we have Title 16, that's good enough. Let's get rid of our law enforcement officers. If we have all these other rules, we don't need anybody to enforce them. We see what happens in our schools. We have rules throughout our schools. There's nobody there to enforce them. Everything's fine. We have judges, Superior Court judges, that sentence people to death row who have oversight. And I thought I heard somebody say I brought up one single case. I think I brought up a case out of Brunswick. I brought up a case out of the Chattahoochee Circuit. I brought a case up, talked about the inaction of district attorney in a county near our state university. And I talked about the misconduct of a district attorney right here in Fulton County who is no longer the district attorney. And those are the ones we know about. Because let me tell you, to the senator from the 46th inquiry, I searched and I searched and I searched, and I think I may have found an artifact from 1960 that may have had something to do with impeachment. 1960. I'm an old guy, and that's older than me. 1960. And then during committee, amazingly, didn't hear any of these overt concerns. Voted out of committee, few questions, talked about a few things. Let me tell you something. I spent over 30 years in the criminal justice system. I welcome oversight into the criminal justice system. I welcome it. I want the individuals in the criminal justice system to be held to the same standard that I was when I was there. I want the standards to be increased. We see riots and we see everything all over this country with people running around saying that the justice system isn't fair and that people are able to do whatever they want to do. I've got some news for you. Citizens are intimidated by the criminal justice system. They're afraid of it. I've had district attorneys call people on the phone offering to make deals, saying, if you drop the complaint, I'll see if I can get an indictment. Got the recording. It is ridiculous to think that we put all this oversight in the criminal justice system and we carve out one little spot for the people with the most important responsibility of indicting. Yes, we have laws throughout the books that we could easily push towards somebody, But I can tell you from experience, and the people that live in the Chattahoochee circuit can tell you from experience, when they tried the bar and they tried other avenues, they found a chasm of hopelessness. And then somebody said, well, do a recall election. Yeah, spend that money, raise that money, go through what's required to get the petition approved, go through the court system, and then go register with ethics, because every dollar you raise in your recall campaign has to be reported just like it's ours, from the information I read. This is the best way to handle this. And you know who like this, who really like it? Good district attorneys, good ethical solicitor generals who do their jobs, review every case, and understand that under Title 15.8.6 and 15.18.6 and 15.18.66, that there's a shopping list of responsibilities that they have to adhere to. And they appreciate the fact, because they're going to do a good job, and they're going to continue to get elected for citizens who want solicitor generals and district attorneys that do a good job regardless of what party they are in. And I will say this in closing. Anybody that wants to sit down afterwards and we'll talk about getting politics out of the criminal justice system, you've got an advocate right here. I ask for your support for SB 92. Let's protect the citizens of Georgia, and let's clean up the criminal justice system where it needs to be cleaned up. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senators yielded the well. The previous question has been ordered, so now we must take up the amendments. The question is on the adoption of Amendment 1, authored by the senator from the 29th. Is there objection to Amendment 1? Without objection, Amendment 1 is adopted. The next amendment is on Amendment 2. Is there objection to Amendment 2? Without objection, Amendment 2 is adopted. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 22nd. For purpose inquiry. State your inquiry.
Isn't it true, Mr. President, since they drafted Amendment 2, they showed that I was right on that issue and right on the other parts of this bill too. They just didn't have time to fix the rest of the bill.
Senator, I wish I could have understood that question. Could you repeat it again?
Isn't it true because of Amendment 2, that shows I was right about the rest of the also problems with this particular bill, and they just didn't have time to write the corrections for the rest of the bill.
Senator is passionate about what he speaks. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 32 and the nays are 24. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. We're going to stand at ease for lunch right now. Let's plan on there is food for the senators in the anteroom and in the pro tem office as well. We're going to break. We'll reconvene here about 1:30. Break for about an hour lunch.